Hello everybody and welcome back to the CPD Group Podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us, is Dr. Lisa Hassler. So she is an educational leadership specialist and the creator of the Brighter Side of Education podcast. Let's have a quick chat with Lisa. Super. So hello Lisa, thank you very much for joining us today. We really do appreciate the time you've spent with us. So, we're going to ask you a range of questions. So hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it, all of this stuff that you've been doing, which sounds fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
So yes, tell us a little bit about yourself, Lisa, and your career in education.
Yeah, so I'm an educational leadership specialist, and I do advising for K-12, and I've been in education for 24 years. So I began teaching first grade in Illinois, moved down to Florida, and then I was lucky enough to be able to teach in a Montessori school. And so it was a nice variety, and it gave me experience in public, private, charter, and Montessori environments where I was able to teach face-to-face, online, and high flex. So with that variety of experiences, it really gave me a broader view on teaching and the world of education. And it really helped to inform and shape my work, even that I'm doing today. Since I left the classroom, I authored 3 books on literacy for K through 8, and I started a consulting company and then created this podcast, The Brighter Side of Education, which is research and innovation and gives resources. So I serve on a school board for, it's a virtual school with students with unique needs. And I advise a dean at the National Louis University in Chicago. And I volunteer with the Online Learning Consortium and am a peer reviewer for the American Journal of Distance Education. And then within my community, I do some outreach and I go to classrooms and I teach students about beekeeping and sea turtle patrols.
Excellent. Excellent. It sounds like you're busy.
I am, yeah.
So when I was doing a little bit of research into your background for the podcast, I noticed that your doctorate was focused on educational leadership with kind of like a core emphasis on online education. So why did that speak to you?
Yeah, well, there's a backstory to that, of course, as everything, right? I was actually traveling in Brazil, and I had noticed when I was at a specific place that the locals were not able to hold like a higher status in jobs. They didn't have as many opportunities if they did not have English as a second language. And so English at that time was not taught in the schools. You would have to go to an English school, and that was expensive. So it was out of reach for these families. So I thought, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to teach them English for free. And so I devised a plan as to how I thought that would work. And I thought that I would go there during my summers, and I would teach virtually while I was teaching here in America, and that all of this could inform my my doctoral study. But I first needed my master's, so I went to the University of St. Francis. St. Francis actually where I got my my elementary degree, but I went to the University of South Florida, both USFs, and I told them my plan, and they said, great. So we worked from that goal and we went backwards and said, well, what's the best master's degree to help with that study? And so it was a master's in online teaching and learning. And then everything was on track. And the year that I graduated with my master's, Brazil had announced that they were now including English as part of their instruction for the public schools. So I needed to shift my plans and my focus. And when it came then to choose what I was going to do for my doctorate, I got a little lost. So I was having a conversation with a local school board member who was also a friend of mine. And we were discussing the low third grade reading proficiency levels that were in the community, in our state, and across the nation. And so that sparked me to go into a different direction. He was wondering, as a school board member, was there any validity to the virtual schools that were in our community? And did they support and prepare second grade students for third grade reading proficiency. And so, he was like, is there any data to even say that they're doing this well? Like, should kids be in virtual school that young? And so I looked into it, and sure enough, there was no data. And so it gave me the direction that I needed to fill the gap in the literature. And plus I was in second grade at the time in a face-to-face classroom. So it really struck me because reading is central to what I'm doing in second grade. And so I thought it was a great way for me to combine my master's degree, my experience with being a first and second grade teacher, and to address a national concern that would be able to fill that gap in literature. So I pivoted my dissertation to study how well virtual schools prepare second graders for third grade reading proficiency, and it ended up being the perfect fit.
What were your findings in that kind of research that you were doing?
Oh, yeah. So what I found was kind of amazing because it was not what everyone, I guess, would have thought at the time. COVID happened while I was doing my dissertation. So it gave me the opportunity to really explore teachers' views on it, what was happening in our community. But the data really was, it went back. So I was able to do a statewide search and background to compare the data from all of the public school students in third grade in the state of Florida to all of those in the virtual schools in the state of Florida. And because they have to take the exact same test, all the third grade students in all public schools have to take it. It was apples to apples. It was being able to read the data side by side. And so I went all the way back to the beginning of testing. And the Florida Virtual School had been in existence for like over 17 years at that point. And so there was a good data trail. And when I was able to compare it, I actually saw that the students in the virtual environments outperformed the students in face-to-face on their reading tests, yes, by 7%.
Right.
And then during COVID, it increased even more, and it continued to stay at a very high level at that point. So it was surprising because anyone would have said, especially after the experience in COVID, oh my gosh, it's terrible. Absolutely not worth it. Don't do it. But I would say that then that just goes to show how, when done right, it does work well.
Oh, fantastic. That's not what I would have expected you to have found, to be quite honest with you.
I know. Nobody does.
Yeah, it's quite surprising results. So if we're looking at kind of the educational leadership side of things, so how has your views on the leadership in education changed over the course of your career?
Yeah, well, I would say that earlier in my career, I thought that leadership was about having all the right answers, right? That you had to be the one to direct that path forward. But over time, between my experiences and my study, I've come to see that leadership is actually deeply rational, and it's about connections and empathy and creating the conditions to make others thrive. So while I was studying for my educational leadership degrees, because I have my specialist and my doctorate in it, I was introduced to the concept of resonant leadership. And those are leaders who teach from an emotional intelligence, from the heart, and with a lot of clarity and purpose. And so I learned that resistance to change often stems from a fear of personal loss. I think when you understand that, then you get why people have a knee-jerk reaction to reject it. And once you understand that, and then understand what do they feel as though they're losing in this, then you can empathize, and then you can learn, you can start from that. And so one of my most powerful examples of resonant leadership was with a professor of mine, Dr. Carla Sparks. She was my professor at the time. She became my dissertation chair, and she was a mentor to me and is, I would still say to this day, a friend. And I was actually able to invite her onto my podcast to talk about resonant leadership.
Lovely.
And to explore the topic because I found her such an inspiration and a great leader to mentor other leaders.
Fantastic. I mean, you must have done a lot of research over your career then, and for your doctorate, essentially in the virtual and online learning space. So, for people that are creating learning and looking to put it into that environment, whether it be, the online kind of standard courses or that virtual classroom, I mean, what kind of advice would you give to those people?
I guess my first thing would be one of the biggest mistakes that we had saw in COVID was that people weren't trained in specifically online teaching and learning methods. And so they took what they knew from the classroom, those classroom methods, and they tried to make it fit an online platform. And that, as we now know, doesn't work so well. And so I would say start with theory. And I would recommend The Theory of Transactional Distance by Michael Graham Moore. And he is the father of distance education theory. And so he had focused on three clusters, and that was structure and dialogue and then student autonomy. And when you focus on those three clusters, you really are able to create a sound structure for being able to have a vibrant, thriving online community. And so and some of the other things I would just say little tips is that you would say high structure, high dialogue, and there was a lot of research done to support that after, he came out with his theory, keeping design in mind. So you start with what do you want to achieve, and then you work your way back. Yeah. I would say chunk content into short segments, build guidance onto how to use the platform with your students. 5-minute videos and 10-minute lesson chunks are top. I would say, just keeping things kind of short and sweet. And those are just general good rules of thumb. Build in your interaction. So I'm not a big fan of discussion boards. Some teachers are. I just don't really like them. But I do believe, though, that you need to provide some routine and connection, and even in like informal and formal moments to help learners stay engaged and to feel part of a community. So building online community is really important, and getting to know your learners. Some students struggle with organization and self-direction, and these students are often referred to as lone wolves. And they will disappear without notice. They'll just kind of walk away. So autonomy only works when it's supported. Knowing how to best support those learners will make them succeed better. So just keeping it in mind that others will need more support than some. And when I wrote my first book, I used this framework for my dissertation. So I was able to apply it to my second grade classroom when I was teaching online and in the high flex model. And it really worked well. I then documented the study and then how I was able to bring that to a second grade level with success. And so his theory, I think it's astounding, and I'm actually trying to get him to be a speaker for a K-12 conference that I'm working with right now. So I'm hoping to be able to meet him in person, and I was able to have him on my podcast and interview him. So emailed him, and so it's been a great relationship ever since.
Fantastic.
So start
Fantastic.
there. Theory. Yeah.
Lovely. Great advice. Super. So, throughout your kind of extensive career in education, what for you personally has been the most rewarding moment?
Okay. Interviewing Dr. Graham Moore. Yes, absolutely.
Super.
So I should say Dr. Michael Graham Moore. Graham is his middle name. That was a really pinnacle moment for me. It was able to, well, let me backtrack. I would say because he was a theorist behind the theory that drove and framed my dissertation work, I had studied him for years, studied his theory, and so it was kind of wild because I didn't really look up from my academic, research. I was like always on these peer-reviewed articles and stuff. And so after I was done with that and I did a search of something current, and I saw that he was still very active in the community for distance education, I was floored. I guess I never thought he was still around. I was like, oh my gosh. So I immediately emailed him. I sent him my work. And within hours, he responded, and he was a big supporter of it. And then he just, he was able to then guide me after that, where he said, you need to present this stuff at, Online Learning Consortium, which I still am involved with today because of him. He recommended me to be a peer reviewer on the journal that he began, so the American Journal of Distance Education, and he's the editor. And so now I get to peer review all articles and studies that have to do with specifically his theory. So he really has, I've grown through that relationship. And so being able to hear his story and to talk with him just was an exceptional moment for me.
Sounds like a fantastic opportunity, to be fair.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads me on very nicely to my next question, Lisa. What's the best piece of advice you've ever gained in your career?
Well, I don't know if there ever came down to a single piece of advice. There's so much, but something I've learned over time is to start with what matters to you and to serve where you are and then to grow from there. You don't have to have it all figured out. I think you just have to start. And so for me, that looked like teaching in classrooms to begin with. And then I just followed up with curiosity into things like different methods like Montessori and then leadership. And I think you just need to trust yourself and that the work will evolve as you evolve. And so every role that I've taken on, whether it was from an author to an advisor to a podcaster, it grew from that same root. And that was my focus on helping students.
Fantastic. So, the world that we operate in with CPD, continuing professional development. So why do you think in the field of education that continually learning and continually growing is so important?
Well, I think because education doesn't stand still and the world is moving and evolving, I think, even more rapidly than it was before. I mean, when I started teaching 25 years ago almost, oh my gosh, it was like, once you got your feet wet and you got through your first, 3 years, you were good. And it's not that way anymore. And so especially with the internet and AI, teachers really need to be on top of it to be able to continue to lead their students and to teach them. And so being able to have that growth mindset is really necessary now.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. So what do you personally feel makes a great educator, whether that's in the classroom or in the online space?
Well, I think a great teacher is a great learner first. I think that the ones that stay curious, adaptable, open to growth, because that is ultimately what you hope to instill in your students. So I think you need to embrace it first. But just as important, great educators create joy in their learning process. A happy classroom makes for happy students, and those students want to come to school and they feel safe to take risks and they're excited to explore with you. So, for example, every Friday in my classroom when I was in second grade, and first grade is too. My gosh, I did that for a long time. We would like turn up the music and dance while we were cleaning the classroom. And nice. Fireball by Pitbull, probably not the best choice, but that was like the go-to for many years. It was like the fan favorite. And I was always like, I hope your parents don't hate me for this and I don't get fired for these lyrics. Don't listen too close. But the kids loved it. And we would dance and they would jump and they would get down low and they would giggle. And it made something as mundane as cleaning the classroom into something that was a tradition and they looked forward to it. And I had the honor of being able to teach some nieces and nephews of mine. And so now, family gatherings, if that song ever comes on, they still want to dance with me to it. So it's just wonderful. And of course, it just is, I'm happy that it brings joy, that they reflect on that experience as a joyful, fun one. Yeah. And also, I'll never forget, though, one of my second grade students, when doing like a science unit, she said, "Hey, can we dissect a frog?" And I had just gone to a science conference and I happened to have a frog in my cabinet that with all of the dissection tools and stuff it is not common practice to dissect animals in second grade. But I was like, I have one in my pocket right now. And so with some prep and, clearance and everything, I guided them through a frog dissection. And they were so proud of this. I mean, not only were they really engaged, they felt like older, because not even the eighth grade students got to do it. And so then that word spread. And for years, it became this part of my routine, a tradition that I never would have gone into had it not been for a student's curiosity families ended up dissecting squids and pigs at home. It became very involved. I had parents who were in the medical field that were so excited that their
Yeah.
child and was excited about science in this way. And I guess the moment taught me that when curiosity aligns with the learning goals, say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's a memory they'll take with them for life now, the
Yes.
fantastic day at school that they had.
Right.
Super. So what's something that you wish more people understood about the realities of education?
Education is not a quick fix.
Yeah.
It's pretty complex. It's deeply human work. It takes time, intention, and support. And there's so much that happens behind the scenes. Teachers are not just delivering the lessons, but they're managing the trauma, supporting families, adapting instructions on the fly. So, and they
Yeah.
have to hold space for every child's emotional and academic needs. When you walk away at the end of the day, that child stays with you. They stay with you from the moment they're on your roster to the last day of school. And so you eat with them, you sleep with them, you worry about them. Um, but I also wish that people saw that most educators are not resistant to change. I
Mm.
think just a lot of people are very exhausted and they're trying to implement a lot of changes all at the same time without really the time or the resources to be able to do it well.
Yeah.
And so change works best when it includes teachers' voice and not when it's handed down with a deadline, because there's so many other things to be doing at the same time. So that can be overwhelming. But I still remain very hopeful because what I've seen happens when educators learn from one another is they get really excited to share their work and to know that what they do, others can learn from. So it's that I guess that community, building that community helps lift each other up. And then that impact ripples outwards. And so in that way, then we are able to reach more students.
Fantastic, fantastic. So this question, the answer might go back to the dissection of the frog here, to be quite honest with you. But what's something that you've learned from a student that really stuck with you over your career?
Yeah, I think it's to be able to see the whole child
Mm.
and not just as a learner, but really as a person. Because there was one student that sticks out over the years, and she was really quiet and she was kind, and sometimes she was visibly sad. And it was usually around lunchtime or snack time. And so I was able to come to the understanding that her home life was quite difficult and that food insecurity was part of her narrative. And so I usually always kept extra food in the classroom for snacks. I big thing of animal crackers or pretzels, whatever it was, so that if someone didn't have snack that day, then there would always be something.
Mm.
And so for her though, I knew that she was not going to have it. And so I made sure to have snacks um, snuck in her desk before she got to school in the morning and to make sure that I had lunch options available for her. And everything was handled very discreetly. I didn't want to embarrass her. I didn't want to bring any notice to it. And so I felt as though, just with through her eyes, through her body language, her hugs, you really knew it was making a difference and it was appreciated. And so she moved that next year. Right, I never saw her again, and so I still look back at being able to make a difference in what seems like a very small way, but it wouldn't have happened had I not noticed
Yeah.
and taken the steps to try to see her and her whole world, not just the world in my classroom.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You would hope that that young person has gone on to have a really wonderful life through education and everything as well. So
Yeah.
well done to you.
Thank you.
Noticing these things is really important. It must be just for that young person's, the whole outlook on life must have changed just due
Yes.
to your kindness, So well done you. Super. So I've noticed again from the research I did into your background and things that you've been a big advocate for those students with dyslexia. So,
Yes.
what do you think that schools can do more to kind of support those students early on?
I think that we need to become familiar with the high percentages of students who do have dyslexia and dyscalculia, and that there needs to be early identification and testing other than psychology tests, which are not really valid. I think that the right support has to be given, and it's not the simple ways with like reading direction that we think, because each student with dyslexia and dyscalculia needs to really be trained and supported individually. There's not one thing that will fit all. There's too many types, and so that when doing those things, then you could really change the trajectory, for their entire future when it comes to their educational journey and their outcomes with careers. So I learned it firsthand because my son had dyslexia or has dyslexia. And at that time, when he's 25 now, when he was diagnosed, it was late. He was in fourth grade. And before then, I just thought, I haven't reached him. I need to figure out his modality, his method, tactile, kinesthetic, right? Doing everything I could. And when he was identified, I just got kind of like a pat on the back, like, well, good luck to you then, And I go, well, what do I do? And it's like, really nothing you could do. There's really nothing you can do. And so I was very lost. I would see students that would come in to my classroom, and whether the diagnosis was there or not, parents would say, oh, I have dyslexia. Yeah, it was just really hard until high school, until it kind of clicked. So I felt really hopeless to be able to give the right support even in my classroom. There wasn't anything really out there. And then I met Dr. Paler Dueller. So she was a mother of a student of mine in second grade. And I learned that she actually had her doctorate in this. Her mother created an educational didactic assessment. And then Livia was able to prove that that assessment was valid through her own doctoral journey. And so that partnership built the American Dyslexia Association, and let's see here, and the Dyslexia Research Center. And so they support students with appropriate testing, and then they give support through training of teachers in the how do you really support students, and then to be able to do like online resources. And they don't charge for it. So these things are available worldwide. She does a lot of testing and training actually in Germany. And so I just feel as though for once I actually have an answer when someone says, my child has dyslexia, and I can say, oh my gosh, there is something now to help you. And it's not just go here and take a test and then good luck. It's go here, take the test, get the support you need. Here are the resources, and here are the teachers that can help train you. So I just think that's very hopeful.
That's really important, isn't it? Giving parents and everything some hope as well, that there is something they can do. That must be a fantastic little resource for the people. Yeah, super. So moving on slightly, let's talk about your podcast. So the brighter side of education. So what inspired you to start the podcast, and, what can people gain from tuning into it?
Well, the podcast actually was a way for me to expand my reach from the classroom. So a lot of times in the classroom, you're teaching, 30 students. And so this gives a much wider, broader reach to be able to affect more students. And I personally always loved learning, and so I kept going back to school, but not everybody has that opportunity. And so by sharing what works, I feel like it really strengthens the educational community. And so I wanted to create something, though, that had research-based, that you were able to actually bring in the people who were doing the work. So the people who wrote the theory, the people that came up with the method, and how what they're doing is solving a problem, a real problem in education, and that it's backed by research to say this is fundamentally valid, and I've done it. And this is how I've done it. And here are resources to help you if you also want to be able to implement it. And so I feel like being able to support teachers in a way that are also short micro learning. It's specific on a content, and you can kind of dip in and dip out at your leisure. A lot of teachers will say that they listen while running, or in the car. And so I feel as though when you go looking for something, because you're saying, oh, I've got this problem and I'm curious about solutions, this is able to fit into that dynamic of it needs to be delivered in a flexible method, a modality that works. And also it needs to be able to be on demand. We can't always wait for a professional development learning day, right?
Absolutely.
To spend all day in it. And then also because a lot of those things, those directives for professional development are handed down. They're directives. You need to learn about this, because we're all learning about it right now. And you go, that's great. I already know that. Or, or that doesn't really apply to what I need in the classroom right now. So I feel like having those valid resources and being able to hear it from the expert's mouth really does give impactful change in the moment when they need it.
Super. And we actually provide the CPD accreditation for your podcasts as well, which is fantastic. I've listened to a couple and they're really, really good. I really like the way you deliver them as well. It's fantastic and really easy just to sit down and listen to and absorb everything. So that's fantastic. So, on a bit of a personal note, why did you choose a CPD group to actually accredit those podcasts? And how do you think your accreditation has impacted it?
Well, to begin with, I always wanted to teach teachers. That was always like my goal. I want to be the teacher of teachers. And then when I created the podcast, it was in that sense to deliver the professional development, right? But on a global scale. I had no idea they could be accredited. And so the CPD group, gave me the ability to have that perfect match of creating the professional development and having the validity behind it. And so it gave it the recognition that I felt it needed to be able to fit into that paradigm. And now educators get to be able to earn some professional learning credits just by listening. And so I can say now that this definitely and with confidence is a tool that does help with continued learning for educators. And then being listed as a provider on the registry also expands my reach. And being able to, it's opened a lot of doors, though, I'd say, not only for the podcast, but growing in other formats as well. So, if I wanted to do research presentations at a conference or create a workshop, those two can then extend my reach and being able to allow that accreditation to, go into other aspects of professional development. So it's a big step and it's one that I'm really proud of. And I'm just happy to be part of it.
Super. We're really happy to have you on board as well. As I say, your podcasts are fantastic. I mean, today I've learned a lot from you today. I've learned a lot about what you're doing and where your journey started and where it's going, those kind of things. So if there was one thing that you would like people to remember from today's conversation, what would that be?
I would say that you don't have to do it all, just to keep learning, to stay connected, and to always share what works. Because when we grow by learning from each other, then ultimately our students do too. So that's always the goal. It's about the students. Fantastic. Well, Lisa, thank you very, very much for joining us. Okay, it's been really interesting talking to you and hearing about your journey. So, and well done you. It sounds like you've done some fantastic work out there. And again, the podcast is amazing. So to everybody, who's viewing or listening to our podcast, tune in to Lisa's because it's actually really, really useful. And there's lots of great information that you can take away from it. So I'd just like to say one more time, Lisa, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you all very much for actually tuning in to our podcast. And we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye. Bye.